Ken, you just told me before this, you learned some lessons. So what are you learning? What are your takeaways? Founder beware stories, so that other founders who are going to be watching this say, hey, I need to put that in the back of my mind and just make sure that I check that box, because that might become an issue for me.
One of the things that I had mentioned is when I met my investor, first I should have never stuck with one investor. And the reason why is because it's almost like it's more competition for them to invest, to be more involved, I guess, is kind of what I was looking for. But at the same time, they start getting cold feet. They need somebody else besides me as a founder to tell them this is okay. Maybe they don't understand. And I'll give you an example. My investor, he had started writing checks for us, and instead of doing a big lump sum, we agreed to doing monthly, or bi-monthly investments. And we had mapped everything out, so everywhere that the money was going and being spent, so he could track everything to make him feel more comfortable and everything like that. And that was actually against your advice, and I regret doing that now. I should have asked for a little bit bigger check as opposed to letting him do more of a line of credit up front. That is something that I learned from. He started getting cold feet because he was like, he had never been an investor before. This is his first time to be an angel investor into anything. And so this is all new territory for him. I didn't bring that into, my perspective, because I didn't think about him getting cold feet. I was like, this guy's going to make all my dreams come true. And, we have the next 4 months mapped out for checks to come in and everything like that. And I didn't understand that, yes, I'm confident, and I was hitting every one of my KPIs. I was ahead of the game. But he still started getting nervous by about that third check. And he just needed to see a little bit more progress for him, internally. But he's not a sales guy. See, he doesn't understand if I'm doing a good job or a bad job. So he can't really relate. So all he sees is, well, we've got the website up and running. We have people that are signing up, but we don't have any checks yet. And I'm like, it takes 6 or 7, conversations with somebody before you ever get a purchase. Because just like I had to sell him, and I try to put that in his perspective. I'm like, how many people did you have me talk to before you committed to signing up for the investment? He was like, oh, we had at least 10 meetings. I'm like, exactly. It's the same thing when it comes to a company parting ways with their money. That's what selling is building a good enough relationship to let them part ways with their money. And it takes time. So I kind of made that mistake. Like you said, I had given some leeway to him in what I was expecting for, like the size of the checks up front, kind of get him more comfortable. And I didn't realize it was going to be that quick, but definitely learned from that. And we're still working around everything. We didn't have like a do or die scenario, but
Sure.
that was it was eye opening. And so if I have a lesson for the other founders, is make sure that your investor is the right fit for what you need. You need
Perfect.
somebody that actually that has been a first time investor before, especially if you're a new technology or something like that.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment and work with the founders. On one hand, I'm going to paint the spectrum. So we got this scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the complete neophyte, newbie investor. Total noob out there, right? No education. And then 10, you've got the savvy VC, or let's say the angel investor that's done like 10 deals. If you go further to 10, the standards are going to be a lot more stringent. They are going to be very, very anal with the due diligence, with all your KPIs, things like that, because they probably looked at so many different deals and they've lost on some, they've learned their lessons, they've got colleagues, they track the industry. So if you've got an experienced investor, well, they're great to work with, but the standards are going to be much higher. Then you go all the way back to 1, which is what Ken was working with, and you've got the investor that's completely new. Maybe, I like to use this term all the time, maybe they got into Bitcoin at $300 and now they could YOLO some money around, right? And talking to people who maybe just exit out of the business and you're going to ask them to roll it over, or they just exited out of real estate, they want to minimize their taxes. I just got that working with a founder. He's like, I got a bite, but someone wants to invest because they want a tax shelter, and here's what they want. And I was like, probably not the best idea to get creative that way. But they're going to have lower standards and they're going to be more open. So the more pre-seed you are, the more that you'll probably be focusing on these types of investors, but you have to do some education. And if you are in a high-tech startup, so Ken here, my man Ken, is building a potential unicorn. I know this. He knows this. We've talked about it. He's going to need funding to grow, and this is a major problem. If the investor's thinking, you know what, I want to own 40% of the company, and I want annuity checks, dividend checks to come in every month, and I want this or all that stuff, you may not have what we call founder investor fit, and that's what Ken is learning, and all of you may be in that situation in different forms or another. But what Ken said was really great. Keep the relationship and learn to educate. And if you have people like us who've been there, seen their done that and say, hey, how about this? How about trying a convertible? Or how about trying this, etc. Then maybe we can come up with an example or a situation that's amenable to the investor. But all deals are creative, everyone. It is not a one-time thing. Y Combinator had it on lock with the safe because they're the biggest game in town. If you want to play with Y Combinator, you have to agree to do a safe. But believe me, only 200 to 300 companies go through Y Combinator every year, and only they're going to be using safe, and they're able to do that. All the other investors all over the place are going to have different types of terms, and they're going to try and negotiate with you. And let me give you another example. Peter Thiel, when he invested into Facebook, you might have thought, oh, he just wrote a safe. He didn't. He wrote a $500,000 check and said it's going to be worth 10% of the company, but only if you convert your first 1.5 million customers. That was the KPI. So Ken mentioned the KPI. Facebook didn't hit it. They didn't hit it. Peter Thiel decided to convert it anyway, and his investment turned into like $3 billion, something like that. So all the deals are going to be different, and you have to get creative. So get ready. Ken, what are some other learning lessons that you're taking away through this experience? Now you're open up another round. You want to diversify that investor pool. What else are you thinking? What's on your mind?
Well, I just want to touch upon what you were talking about, how you have to be creative with everything. The one thing that I did was, and this actually came from some advice that I got from Marc Underwood, who's one of the other founders here on Startups. He's actually acting as my chief legal officer, in fractional form. He told me, he said, Ken, you have the $300,000 commitment, but they only get the percentages when they actually pay, because we did kind of the installments. And so I actually protected myself, because if I find that I don't like the way that they're doing the investment, I can stop taking his money.
Yeah.
At any time. I'm not obligated to take any more of his money. And that was one of and you also gave me the same advice, is to be cautious. I didn't want to just give away 15% of my company unless I knew that I had enough of an investment that it was going to get me through my MVP and up to where I'm starting to scale the business. That was my entire goal, was to make sure that I had that commitment. So I built that protection in there. So if I feel that this guy is getting too much cold feet, he doesn't have a board seat, he doesn't have all these different things, those were all things that he could attain through investment. But if he doesn't get to that point, I don't have to give it. And so I did protect myself in that form. And I think, like you said, your advice that you're giving is what these people, they need to listen to, because really, y'all have been there and y'all have done that. And I didn't think about that. But when you coached me on that, I put it in the back of my Rolodex and it came to fruition. And so, but I still have 97% of my company left.
Yes,
I don't have 5 or 10% or 30% gone. So, but back to it, the one thing, and this is something that Will told me in the very beginning. He said, just because you get your investors doesn't make life any easier. It actually makes it more difficult.
Yes,
and
true.
By actually receiving the investment, now not only am I really beholden to that person to protect their investment, but also my own. I actually have to be a lot more balanced and structured in what I do in my day-to-day activities, because I'm not just a founder anymore. Now I'm the founder of a company with investors, and that's where I have to make sure that I'm staying with the coaching, like from you guys, and continuing to get great advice so that I don't fail. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right things, and I'm pivoting when I need to pivot, which I had to do that in the last 30 days. That I had to pivot because I had a roadmap and we had it all mapped out, but I lost a couple of checks, and so I had to pause things. But I'm still operating in a forward momentum, because I was prepared for that. If we had to pause the technical development of the product, I have enough of my product and MVP ready that my customers can see it and they're comfortable with it. And that's why we call it an MVP, a minimally viable product. I got that piece done before I went to market with it. If we have to pause some of the fine tuning, if my customers truly want to be a part of this, because I'm more of a service than anything. I'm not a technology. This is a tool to help me manage my time. And that's another thing that I realized in my time with startups, is I'm not a SaaS product. I'm a service organization that has a SaaS and a platform behind me to help me perform to my capabilities. And so that's where I had to differentiate even my pitch. My customers was, I'm providing the service for you. We're going to match you with those vendors. We're going to take a lot of that workload off there. The technology is just there to help us.
Let's break that down, because I think this is very important, because I know there's some SaaS founders in our audience right now. Every company in the beginning starts off, if you're doing it properly, selling a service. And if you can sell the service and solve the problem, and you use technology to make yourself more efficient, then eventually you'll make the revenue to make your technology so efficient that now people don't have to be involved. It's very rare that you see a SaaS company come right out of the gate and have 100% completely automated software at 65% margin. just doesn't happen. And there's this concept where it's like SaaS needs recurring revenue, and that true. ARR, MRR, recurring revenue. But then there's another metric that a lot of founders don't realize that investors look at and they get shocked, and that's net retained revenue, NRR. So how many people stay with you? But then there's this sliding scale of revenue run rate, which is different than recurring revenue, which investors will look at and they'll say, okay, we have 50% of our revenue based on, bespoke services and then delivered by hand, and then 50% is done with automation. And now slowly one's going to overtake the other. Investors are okay with that. In fact, I would prefer if founders went out there and they actually sold what they were doing as a consultation service first, learn the service component, learn how to deliver results, got the feedback so it informs how they're building their SaaS, which is exactly what I did. In the beginning, when I had my SaaS, the one that got purchased, we interviewed out at Y Combinator, and then they gave me some great advice on automation, and then my number one customer bought us because they didn't want us to go to Y Combinator. So, okay, understand. It was great, good exit. The first thing that I did is I sold as a service, and I did it as a black box, and I didn't even have the product. So what I did was I said, what's this service worth to you? And when they said $3,000, I said, done, I'll have it. And I pretended it was a black box, and I manually pretended like it was a SaaS. I manually created the outputs, manually created the dashboards. I was bleary-eyed all night with using Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, and I faked it. And I learned to sell it, and that's how I got my number one best customer. And I made $135,000 selling the service manually before I even laid one piece of code, right? And, brought the developers on. So what Ken is talking about, everyone, it's okay to have your revenue split. And in fact, sometimes it's preferable. And that's how you're getting your customers right now, Ken, right? That's how you're getting the ones to show the social proof that, yes, this is something that people want to buy.
Yeah, and one of the other things, again, I hate to sound like a homer, but because of the other founders that I've met through startups, and it's not just you guys, it's all the other founders. I realized that I'm not building a SaaS. I thought I was, but I thought I was building an online community. Thought I was building this social media empire and all these other things a year ago. This is a 2-year project, and we just went live with it back in September. But I'm in a completely different area of what I'm performing because I realized that what I've done is I've kind of bottled up Ken Gobble. I've taken my 25 years of sales experience, and instead of me doing it for lead generation for sales people, I'm taking my specialties now to the buyers. And I realized that I don't need a SaaS to do this. I don't need a CRM system type interface. I need a tool that's going to help me bring the people together and just kind of standardize things.
Yeah.
So I'm building a tool, and it's the service that we're putting out there. And eventually the technology will completely automate. Just like what you said, we are growing our database. And once I have 25,000 companies across the world in my database, we will be that unicorn that's bringing everybody together through our methodology. For now, just like what you said, every single person that I get is data entry into our backend database right now. There is no automation. We don't need it. And my customers are fine with that because I'm performing a service. And as long as I can perform the service to what their requirements are, I'm meeting my end of my SLA. So,
right on.
And that's where I was all hung up on my MVP, 6 months ago. And I kept talking to more people, within, startups, and they're like, no, you get even more basic than that and just take that out and start building your revenue because, this is what you're doing. And just talking about it made me realize that. So that was a huge light bulb moment for me was when I realized that I have a basic website. It's a brochure site. It's there to get people to sign up. And then there's a whole portal behind it that people don't see until they sign up.
Yeah.
But once they sign up and then they get to see what the MVP really looks like.
Yeah, it's not to say that you can't in the future get into the social network and the community and all those
absolutely.
things. But let's make some money now. Let's show investors we're willing to make money now. I don't need $2.5 million to build my MVP. It's viable now, and we got traction, and that's all you need.
Yep. And that's exactly where, I thought I was going to need 12 people to be working with me. I thought I was going to have this massive team and everything else. And, basically bootstrapped it with a fractional CTO that, I had to give a very small, equity stake to get him interested in it. And he did, part-time work at night, and on weekends, whenever he had some free time to help me. And then the minute that we got our funding, then we went out and we hired in the contractors to get the product up to speed. And we did more in the first 3 weeks than we planned on doing the first 2 months. And so that was just another, verification that you don't need to have this giant IT department building your products. If you have somebody that really knows what they're doing, and I meet more and more of those other founders that are like that, it just helps you stabilize your launch to where I can get to the revenue state, to where I have the money coming in, just like you said, with my traction. And then once I have the traction, then I turn it into repeatable, and that's when I start to scale. If I can turn this into a repeatable, operation as Ken Gobble, then I can hire somebody and train them to go and replicate what I'm doing, and then keep that momentum going, and that's how we're going to grow and scale the company.
Perfect. I love the approach.